The training hall smelled of recycled air and nervous anticipation. Instructor Vexithar stood at the podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the latest batch of recruits for the Galactic Conservation Corps. His scales rippled with an iridescent sheen under the harsh fluorescent lighting, giving him an almost theatrical appearance that he clearly enjoyed. "Listen well, cadets," his voice boomed across the amphitheater. "Today we discuss the most dangerous category of fauna in our mapped universe, Category 7 Predators, Deathworld Killers." The assembled students, representing 14 different species, leaned forward with varying degrees of interest. Vexithar had a reputation for being dramatic, but he knew his subject matter. 20 cycles of field experience tended to do that. "Now," he continued, activating the holographic display, "when we classify a creature as Category 7, we're talking about apex predators from planets with a gravity rating above 1.3 standard, atmospheric toxicity levels that would liquefy most civilized species, and survival competition so intense that evolution basically said, forget mercy, let's just make nightmares." A nervous chittering came from the Quilvan section. Vexithar smiled, showing far too many teeth. "Oh yes, my gelatinous friends, be afraid. These creatures are why the Conservation Corps exists. Someone has to make sure idiots don't try to keep them as pets, or, heaven forbid, introduce them to colony worlds." In the third row, sandwiched between a towering Grenth and a floating Whisper, sat Marcus Webb. He looked unremarkable by most standards. Average height for his species, brown hair that refused to cooperate with any styling product ever invented, and a tendency to slouch that drove his academy instructors crazy. His uniform bore the same trainee insignia as everyone else's, though his fit slightly differently due to his species' unusual proportions. The classification on his student badge read Homo sapiens, origin, Earth, restricted access, gravity tolerance, 1.0 standard. Marcus had learned early on that most people didn't bother reading past the gravity tolerance rating. Anything at 1.0 or below was considered soft-world stock. Farmers, artists, administrators. Not the kind of species you'd expect in a Conservation Corps training program. He'd kept his head down for 3 weeks now. Let the others assume he was some bureaucrat's kid who'd pulled strings to get into the program. It was easier that way. "Now," Vexithar's voice snapped Marcus back to attention, "let me show you something that will haunt your dreams. This is the Krell Razorbear from Thaxus Prime. Gravity, 2.1 standard. Atmospheric composition, sulfur dioxide and methane. Surface temperature, -40 degrees at the warmest equatorial zones." The hologram materialized, showing a creature that looked like someone had crossed a bear with a porcupine, and then given it anger management issues. It stood, 4 meters tall, covered in metallic quills that could apparently shoot out like missiles. Its jaws could crush titanium-reinforced containment units. "This beauty," Vexithar said with genuine admiration, "has toxin glands in its claws. One scratch, and you're paralyzed within seconds. Then it takes its time, eating you, while you're conscious, while you feel everything." Several students made distressed noises. The Quilvan in front of Marcus began secreting stress mucus. "But here's the thing," Vexithar continued, pacing the stage like a predator himself. "The razor bear isn't even in the top 10 most dangerous Category 7 species. Want to know why?" Silence. "Because it's predictable. It's a straightforward apex predator. You see it, you run, you maybe survive if you're fast and lucky. Simple." He snapped his middle right hand for emphasis. "The truly terrifying Deathworld killers are the ones with intelligence, strategy, the ones that adapt." He switched the hologram to show a sleek, six-legged creature with too many eyes. The Verxian shadow stalker, pack hunter, tool user, has been observed setting traps, using decoys, and even learning to operate mechanical doors. There are documented cases of these creatures disabling security systems to access prey. Marcus watched his fellow students react with appropriate horror. The Grenth beside him actually whimpered, which was impressive given that Grenths stood nearly 3 meters tall and had natural armor plating. 3 cycles ago, Vexithar said, his tone dropping to something almost reverent, a shadow stalker pack infiltrated a research station on Verxian. Know what they did? They didn't just attack. They studied patrol patterns for 2 weeks. Then they synchronized an assault with a shift change. Killed the lights first. Took out communications second. Then they systematically hunted every researcher in that facility. 47 scientists. Not one survived. The lecture hall had gone completely silent. This, cadets, is what you need to understand. These aren't animals in the sense that soft-world species are animals. These are evolved killing machines with millions of years of survival pressure creating the perfect hunter. And our job, our sacred duty, is to ensure they stay exactly where they evolved. Never, ever underestimate a Deathworld predator. Instructor? A voice called out. It was Pelix, a 4-armed Ranthian with more confidence than sense. Are there any documented cases of Deathworld predators being successfully domesticated? Vexithar's expression suggested Pelix had just asked if vacuum was breathable. Domesticated? Domesticated? His scales flushed a dark purple. Listen very carefully. Domestication requires thousands of generations of selective breeding. It requires a species with specific traits that make them amenable to living with other species. And most importantly, it requires that the species in question doesn't see you as food. He pulled up another image. This one showed what looked like a feline creature, but wrong somehow. Its proportions were off, too fluid, too purposeful. This is a Dralkin cat from Nexus 7. Some absolute genius thought, "Oh, it looks like a cat. How dangerous could it be?" Know what happened? Nobody answered. It waited. 6 months of perfect behavior. Purring, playing, everything you'd expect from a domesticated companion. Then, one day, without warning, it tore through a reinforced viewport, survived vacuum exposure for 43 seconds, and disappeared into a ventilation system. Took 3 months to find it. Found it by following the trail of bodies. Turns out it had been breeding. In the vents. For 3 months. The station had to be evacuated and sterilized. Marcus felt his eyebrow twitch. He'd grown up with cats. Hell, his family had had a cat that was meaner than half the creatures Vexthar was describing. Old Mr. Whiskers had once fought off a coyote, but he kept that thought to himself. The point is, Vexithar continued, Deathworld predators cannot be trusted. They cannot be reasoned with. They are, by definition, survivors of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. They have evolved specifically to kill and survive. Any attempt to interact with them beyond proper containment and observation protocols is suicide. He paused, looking around the room with all 4 eyes. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but Instructor, surely there must be exceptions. Surely there are Deathworld species that are peaceful, or at least manageable. And to that I say, no, absolutely not. There are no friendly Deathworld species. The entire classification exists specifically because these creatures are universally dangerous. Marcus shifted in his seat. The lecture was getting a bit heavy-handed. Sure, dangerous predators existed. But the way Vexithar talked, you'd think anything from a high-gravity world was basically a xenomorph from those old horror movies. "Let me show you another example," Vexithar said, warming to his subject. "This is particularly relevant because we've recently had some incidents regarding this species." The hologram shifted to show something that made several students recoil. It was vaguely humanoid, but covered in thick fur, with massive fangs and claws that looked like they could rend metal. Its posture suggested power, barely contained. The Thraxian gorewolf, bipedal, pack hunter, apex predator from a world with 1.8 standard gravity. These creatures are smart enough to use basic tools, strong enough to tear through standard hull plating, and mean enough to hold grudges across generations. There's a documented case of a gorewolf pack tracking a shipping crew across 3 systems because that crew had accidentally killed one of their young during a landing. 3 systems? Someone whispered. 3 systems, Vexithar confirmed. They hitched rides on cargo ships, survived in cargo holds, waited months between attacks. Patient, strategic, terrifying. Marcus found himself actually paying attention now, despite his intention to remain unnoticed. The gorewolf thing did sound genuinely dangerous, though he couldn't help but think about some of the stories his grandmother used to tell about Australian wildlife. Drop bears weren't real, but cassowaries definitely were, and those things were basically velociraptors with feathers. "Now," Vexithar said, his tone shifting to something darker, "I want to talk about the real nightmare fuel. The creatures that don't just kill you quickly. The ones that play with their food." The lights dimmed further, and the hologram showed something that looked almost cute. Small, fuzzy, with big eyes. "This is a Merkel from Glacius 9. Looks harmless, doesn't it?" Nods around the room. It did look harmless. "This thing," Vexithar said with evident satisfaction, "secretes a paralytic agent through its fur. Just touching it causes full-body paralysis within minutes. Then it burrows into its victim's chest cavity and eats them from the inside out. The paralytic keeps you conscious the entire time, and the process takes 3 days." The stress mucus production from the Quilvan student reached critical levels. Marcus grimaced. Okay, that was genuinely horrifying. Point to Vexithar. "But here's what I really want to emphasize," the instructor continued, moving to the front of the stage. "The most dangerous thing about Deathworld predators isn't their strength or their claws or their venom. It's their adaptability. These creatures evolved in environments that actively tried to kill them every single day. They learned to survive against impossible odds. They developed hunting strategies that account for prey that fights back. They became, essentially, the universe's perfect survivors." He paused for dramatic effect, which Marcus had to admit was pretty well timed. "And the scariest part? We keep finding new ones. Every cycle, exploration teams map new death worlds, and every cycle, we discover new nightmares. There are currently 47 classified death worlds in the known galaxy, 47 planets that are so hostile, so dangerous, that the Galactic Council has declared them off-limits for colonization. And on every single one of those worlds, there are predators that would consider everything in this room a light snack." The Grenth beside Marcus whispered something about reconsidering career choices. "So, let me be absolutely clear," Vexithar said, his voice carrying authority that demanded attention. "If you ever encounter a Deathworld predator in the field, you do not engage. You do not try to contain it unless you have a full tactical team with proper equipment. You definitely do not try to pet it, domesticate it, or convince yourself that it's just misunderstood. You report it, you mark the location, and you get as far away as possible. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the hall. "Good, because I don't want to have to file another incident report about a cadet who thought they could befriend something with cute ears that happened to be filled with neurotoxin dispensers." Marcus almost laughed at that one, but caught himself. The image was pretty ridiculous. Vexithar pulled up a star map, highlighting several systems. "These are the current quarantine zones. Death worlds where we maintain monitoring stations but no permanent presence. Your job, should you graduate from this program, might involve rotations to these stations. You'll observe, you'll catalog, and most importantly, you'll maintain the containment protocols that keep these creatures exactly where they belong." Instructor Vexithar? Another student, this one a floating whisper whose voice came from a translation device. "Are there any Death World species that have ever left their home planets naturally? Through their own technology or evolution?" The instructor's expression turned grave. "No. Thank the cosmic void, no. Can you imagine? A species with the survival instincts and predatory nature of a Death World creature developing space travel? It would be catastrophic. They'd spread across the galaxy like a plague, dominating every ecosystem they encountered. We'd be facing an extinction-level scenario for most civilized species." Marcus felt his jaw tighten slightly, but kept his expression neutral. The irony of this conversation wasn't lost on him. "Nature has blessed us," Vexthar continued, seemingly unaware of the universe's sense of humor, "in that Death World species lack the cognitive capacity for advanced tool use and scientific development. They're perfect hunters, yes, but they're still just animals. Sophisticated, terrifying animals. But animals nonetheless. The galaxy is safer for it." "What about intelligence?" Pelix asked, apparently not having learned his lesson from earlier. "Could a Death World species theoretically evolve sentience?" Vexithar actually laughed at that. Not a polite chuckle, but a full, condescending laugh that echoed through the hall. "Sentience requires more than just basic problem-solving, cadet. It requires cooperation, abstract thinking, cultural development. Death World species are too focused on survival to develop those traits. They're solitary or pack hunters, not society builders. The environmental pressure that makes them such effective killers is the same pressure that prevents higher cognitive function. They simply don't have the evolutionary pathway to sentience." He gestured broadly, addressing the entire class. "Think about it logically. A species developing on a Death World would spend all its evolutionary resources on survival traits. Stronger muscles, sharper claws, better camouflage, enhanced senses. There's no evolutionary advantage to developing art, or philosophy, or mathematics when you're too busy trying not to be eaten by something even worse than you. Sentience is a luxury of soft worlds, where survival is easy enough that intelligence becomes advantageous." Marcus had heard this theory before. It was popular in xenobiology circles, this idea that harsh environments and intelligence were mutually exclusive. He'd read 3 papers on it in his xenobiology course. All 3 papers were wrong, but he wasn't about to raise his hand and mention that his homeworld had a gravity rating of 1.0 standard only because the Galactic Council had fudged the numbers to avoid causing panic. Earth's actual gravity? 0.98 galactic standard. Which sounded fine until you realized the standard was based on averages from low-gravity core worlds. By Death World metrics, Earth clocked in at around 1.7 to 2.1, depending on which classification system you used. The atmospheric oxygen content alone would be considered toxic to most species in this room. And don't even get started on the wildlife. But Earth wasn't classified as a Death World. It was classified as Restricted Access Pending Cultural Development Assessment, which was diplomatic speak for, "We found these guys late, and they already have nukes, so let's pretend everything is normal while we figure out what to do." "Let me show you one final example," Vexithar said, advancing to what was clearly his grand finale. "This is the creature that, in my professional opinion, represents the absolute pinnacle of Deathworld evolution. The thing that keeps me up at night when I really think about the implications of its existence." The hologram shifted to show something that looked almost draconic. 6 limbs, armored hide, multiple eyes, and a jaw structure that suggested it could bite through practically anything. "The Zarathian apex hunter," Vexthar breathed, genuine fear coloring his voice. "Found on Zarath Prime, a world with 2.4 standard gravity, temperatures that swing from boiling to freezing in a matter of hours, and an atmosphere that's basically poison gas soup. This creature is the ultimate survivor. It can adapt to temperature extremes, it can survive without food for up to a standard year, it has redundant organ systems, and it's smart enough to learn from its mistakes." "Learn from mistakes?" someone asked weakly. "Oh yes. There's a documented case of an apex hunter being repelled by an electric fence. Know what it did? It spent a week observing the fence, then tunneled under it. When that tunnel was discovered and collapsed, it tried going over. When anti-climb measures were implemented, it waited 3 months, then attacked during a power outage. It remembered. It adapted. It won." The silence in the hall was absolute. "This is why," Vexithar said softly, "we maintain quarantine protocols. This is why we take Deathworld threats seriously. Because somewhere out there, on planets we haven't even discovered yet, there are creatures that make the apex hunter look tame. And our job is to make sure they never, ever become anyone else's problem." He straightened, returning to his more professional demeanor. "You have assignments on your datapads. Review the containment protocols for categories 5 through 8. We'll have a practical examination next week involving simulated containment breach scenarios. I expect you all to take this seriously. The life you save will likely be your own." As students began gathering their belongings, Vexithar added one last comment. "Oh, and one more thing. For those of you from soft-world species, don't feel discouraged. The Conservation Corps needs administrators, logistics coordinators, and data analysts just as much as we need field agents. There's no shame in playing to your species' strengths." Marcus stood slowly, collecting his data pad. Around him, students chattered nervously about the lecture, comparing notes on which creature was the most horrifying. The Grenth beside him was still muttering about career changes. As he headed toward the exit, Pellix fell into step beside him. "That was intense, right?" the Ranthian said, his 4 arms gesturing excitedly. "I mean, I knew Deathworlds were dangerous, but I didn't realize how dangerous. Makes you grateful we evolved on civilized planets, right, Webb?" Marcus managed a non-committal grunt. "I mean, could you imagine actually coming from one of those places?" Pellix continued, oblivious. "Having to worry about being eaten every day? No wonder they never developed sentience. Too busy surviving." "Yeah," Marcus said carefully. "Can't imagine." They reached the corridor outside the lecture hall, where students were dispersing toward various destinations. Pellix waved goodbye as he headed toward the commissary, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He pulled out his data pad, scrolling through the assignment Vexithar had posted. Categories 5 through 8, containment protocols, threat assessment matrices, standard stuff. His personal messages indicator blinked. One new message from an address he recognized, his younger sister, Emma, back home. "Hey, Marcus," her message began, accompanied by a photo. Look what followed me home. Mom says I can keep her if I promise to feed her and clean up after her. I named her Princess Fluffy Butt. Isn't she adorable? The photo showed Emma grinning broadly, holding what most of the galaxy would classify as a mid-level predator, canine species, descended from wolves, approximately 15 kilograms, capable of running at speeds exceeding 40 kilometers per hour, bite force sufficient to crack bones, pack hunter instincts. Most species in the galaxy would see that image and call for a tactical response team. Emma had dressed it in a tiny sweater and given it a squeaky toy. Marcus smiled despite himself. He typed back a quick response. She's cute. Make sure she gets her shots, and don't let her chew on the furniture. He pocketed the data pad and started walking toward his quarters. Tomorrow would be another day of lectures, probably more graphic descriptions of creatures that would give his classmates nightmares. More discussions of how Deathworld species were unsophisticated killing machines without higher cognitive function. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Andromeda sector, Earth continued spinning. Humans went about their business, blissfully unaware that the rest of the galaxy considered their entire planet a quarantine-worthy nightmare zone. They kept their Deathworld apex predators as pets, jogged through environments that would hospitalize most aliens, and generally went about their lives without realizing how absolutely terrifying they appeared to anyone who actually knew the truth. Marcus had 3 more months of training before he could apply for field assignments. 3 more months of listening to lectures about how dangerous Deathworld species were, all while being one himself. The irony was almost perfect. Almost. The simulation bay hummed with energy as Marcus suited up for the practical examination. 1 week had passed since Vexithar's memorable lecture, and now 23 cadets stood ready to prove they understood containment protocols. All right, everyone, listen up, Vexithar's voice boomed through the speakers. This is a standard Category 6 breach scenario. You'll be working in teams of 4. Your objective is simple: contain the escaped specimen, minimize casualties, and follow proper safety protocols. The simulation responds to your actions, so think before you act. Stupidity will result in simulated death, which means failing this examination. Marcus found himself grouped with Pelix, a nervous Quilvan named Bloop, and a methodical Whisper called 13. Not the worst team possible, but not exactly the dream team either. The simulation loaded, and suddenly they were standing in a replica research station corridor. Red emergency lights flashed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, something roared. "Okay, team," Pelix said, trying to project confidence. "Webb, you're soft world stock, so you hang back and monitor communications. 13, you're on sensors. Bloop, you're with me on containment equipment." Marcus bit back a response. Soft world stock. Right. Guys? Bloop's voice wavered as his gelatinous form quivered. The breach alarm says it's coming from Section 7. That's the high-gravity habitat zone. High gravity? Pelix's confidence faltered slightly. How high? 2.1 standard, 13 reported, his translation device rendering his species' electromagnetic pulses into audible speech. The escaped specimen is listed as a Krell razor bear. Toxin level, lethal. Aggression index, maximum. Recommended containment team size, 12 members with heavy equipment. We have 4 people and 1 stun rifle, Pelix said, staring at their woefully inadequate gear. Maybe we should call for backup, Bloop suggested, already secreting stress mucus. The building shook. Distant screaming echoed through the corridors, followed by the distinctive sound of metal tearing. "No time," Marcus said quietly. "It's between us and the evacuation. Route. We either contain it or people die." Everyone looked at him. Soft World Web, offering tactical analysis. He's right, 13 confirmed. Current trajectory puts the specimen on course to intercept civilian evacuation within 4 minutes. Okay, Pelix muttered, his forearms checking and rechecking their equipment. Standard protocol. We use the environment. 13. Find me access to atmospheric controls. If we can flood the corridor with coolant gas, it might slow the creature down enough for us to establish a containment field. They moved quickly, following 13's sensor readings through the twisting corridors. The evidence of the Razor Bear's passage became increasingly obvious. Scratch marks gouged into walls, doors torn from their hinges, and eventually, bodies. Simulated, but disturbingly realistic. "This is insane," Bloop whispered. "How did facilities let something this dangerous breach containment?" "Because simulations always make the security protocols fail," Marcus replied, keeping his voice calm. "Real life isn't usually this catastrophic." They reached the atmospheric control station. 13 interfaced with the system, while Pelix set up the portable containment field generator. Their plan was sound. Funnel the creature into a narrow corridor, slow it with coolant, then trap it in an energy field until proper containment teams arrived. Then the Razor Bear came around the corner. The holographic projection was terrifyingly detailed. 4 meters of muscle, fury, and metallic quills that rattled as it moved. Its eyes fixed on them with predatory intelligence. For a moment, everyone froze. "Now!" Pelix screamed. 13 activated the coolant system. Gas flooded the corridor, obscuring visibility but hopefully slowing the creature. Pelix triggered the containment field. Nothing happened. "What? No! No! No!" Pelix frantically worked the controls. "The generator isn't responding." "It's the cold," Marcus realized. "The coolant gas froze the field generator's power cells." The Razor Bear emerged from the gas cloud, moving slower but definitely not stopped. It shook itself, sending quills flying like missiles. The team scattered. Bloop caught 3 quills and dissolved with a simulated death scream. 13's projection flickered as quills passed through his energy form, though his physical housing unit sparked and failed. Simulated casualty. That left Marcus and Pelix. "The stun rifle!" Pelix shouted, tossing the weapon to Marcus while he ran in the opposite direction, trying to draw the creature's attention. Marcus caught the rifle automatically, his hands settling into the grip with practiced ease. The weapon felt awkward, designed for species with different hand structures, but he adjusted his grip and aimed. The Razor Bear focused on Pelix, clearly recognizing the larger, more active target as primary prey. It charged, moving with shocking speed despite its bulk. Marcus didn't panic. He'd been hunting since he was 12 years old. Deer were fast. Bears were dangerous. This thing was basically a combination of both with some nightmare fuel thrown in. He led the target, accounting for movement and distance, then fired. The stun bolt caught the Razor Bear in the shoulder. It stumbled, but didn't stop. He fired again, this time aiming for the head. Direct hit. The creature slowed, its movements becoming uncoordinated. Marcus advanced, firing methodically, each shot placed with precision. Not random panic fire, but controlled, efficient target placement. The Razor Bear collapsed, stunned but alive, exactly according to containment protocols. Don't kill unless absolutely necessary. Pelix stared from his hiding position behind an overturned equipment crate. You just contained the target," Marcus finished, lowering the rifle. "Isn't that what we were supposed to do?" The simulation ended. They stood back in the empty training bay, other teams visible in their own simulation spaces throughout the large room. Vexithar's voice came through the speakers, directed at their team specifically. "Interesting approach, Cadet Webb. Report to my office after the examination period concludes." The next 2 hours crawled by as other teams completed their scenarios. Most failed. A few managed creative solutions involving environmental hazards or managed retreats. None had actually contained their specimen through direct confrontation. When Marcus finally stood outside Vexthar's office, he couldn't quite read the instructor's expression. The door slid open before he could knock. "Sit," Vexthar commanded, his 4 eyes studying Marcus with unsettling intensity. Marcus sat. "I've been reviewing your file, Cadet Webb," the instructor began, pulling up a holographic display. "Your scores are adequate. Nothing spectacular, but solid. Your theoretical knowledge is acceptable. But that simulation, that was remarkable marksmanship for someone from a low-gravity world. I practiced, sir. Clearly." Vexthar zoomed in on the simulation replay, showing Marcus's precise shot placement. "These are stress shots, under pressure, against a fast-moving target significantly larger than yourself. You didn't panic, you didn't freeze, and you put every shot exactly where it needed to go." He paused, his scales shifting to a thoughtful amber color. "Tell me, Cadet Webb, what's your homeworld's primary predator?" Marcus hesitated. This was dangerous territory. "We have several, sir. Depends on the region." "Give me an example." "Bears, sir. Large omnivores with significant strength advantages. Sharks in aquatic regions. Various big cats. Crocodilians near water. Wolves in pack formations." Vexthar's eyes widened slightly. "Your world has multiple apex predators?" "Yes, sir. Different environmental niches support different species." "And these bears? How large?" "The largest species can reach approximately 2.5 meters tall when standing upright, sir. Mass around 600 kilograms. The instructor's scales flushed pale. In galactic standard measurements, that meant bears on Earth were roughly comparable in size to Krell razor bears. Maybe smaller, but not by much. And humans interact with these creatures? Sometimes, sir. Usually we try to avoid them. But we have protocols for encounters. Make yourself appear large, back away slowly, don't run. Running triggers chase instinct. You've encountered these bears personally? Twice, sir. Camping trips with my family. Both times we followed protocol, and nothing happened. Vexthar leaned back in his chair, all 4 arms crossing over his chest. Cadet Webb, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. What is your homeworld's actual gravity rating? Marcus met his gaze steadily. My official file lists it as 1.0 standard, sir. That's not what I asked. A long pause stretched between them. Approximately 1.7 to 2.1, sir, depending on which measurement system you use. The official rating uses averages that simplify certain factors. The color drained from Vexthar's scales completely. You're from a death world. The Galactic Council doesn't classify it as such, sir. Because they're terrified of the diplomatic implications. Vexthar stood abruptly, pacing. By all the stars, I've spent the last week lecturing about Death World predators to an actual Death World species. I prefer to think of myself as a cadet, sir. Don't be glib. The instructor whirled. Do you understand what this means? You're from a planet that should be under quarantine, a planet that produces apex predators with developed sentience. Sir, with respect, humans aren't apex predators. Vexthar laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. No? You evolved persistence hunting. You can track prey across vast distances. You have binocular vision for depth perception, forward-facing eyes, predator configuration. You're an endurance specialist who evolved to literally chase prey until it died from exhaustion. And somehow, you developed advanced cognition alongside those hunting adaptations. Marcus remained silent. There wasn't much he could say to that. The other students, Vexthar continued, the lecture. I stood there explaining how Deathworld species can't develop sentience, can't build societies, can't create technology. And you sat there, listening, knowing everything I said was wrong. You weren't completely wrong, sir. Those creatures are dangerous. Your protocols are sound. The fact that humans also evolved on a harsh world doesn't invalidate your expertise. Doesn't invalidate? Vexithar's voice cracked. I called your entire species evolutionary impossibilities. To be fair, sir, you didn't know. That was the point. Earth's classification is restricted information. Most species in the galaxy have no idea we exist. The instructor sat down heavily, looking genuinely shaken. How many others? He asked quietly. How many humans are in the Conservation Corps? Just me, sir. In training, at least. There are a few humans in administrative positions, but they don't work with dangerous fauna directly. Most of our people prefer to stay close to home. We're still pretty new to galactic society. But you volunteered. Why? Marcus considered the question carefully. Because the work matters, sir. You were right about one thing in your lecture. Deathworld predators are dangerous. They need proper management, proper protocols. Someone needs to ensure they're protected and contained. I grew up around dangerous wildlife. I understand it, respect it. Seemed like a good fit. A good fit, Vexthar repeated numbly. You're from a world that would give most species nightmares, and you think managing other Deathworld creatures is a good career choice. When you put it that way, sir, it does sound a bit strange. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the office, other cadets passed by, chatting about the simulations, completely unaware of the conversation happening behind closed doors. I should report this, Vexithar said finally. Your presence here represents a massive security oversight. You could, sir, but my credentials are legitimate. I passed all the same entrance examinations as everyone else. My psychological evaluations show I'm stable, cooperative, and have appropriate respect for dangerous fauna. And frankly, given my background, I'm probably better qualified than most candidates. Better qualified to do what, exactly? Wrestle razor bears with your bare hands? No, sir. Better qualified to understand predator behavior from first-hand experience, to remain calm under pressure, to make accurate threat assessments. The simulation proved I can do the job. Vexthar studied him for a long moment. If I allow you to continue in this program, you need to understand something. You can't hide what you are forever. Eventually, someone will figure it out. And when they do, there will be panic, fear, possibly violence. I know, sir, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. This program, this work, it's important. Not just for the galaxy, but for Earth too. We need to understand how to coexist with other species, both sentient and non-sentient. We need to prove we're not the monsters everyone fears. The monsters everyone fears, Vexithar echoed. You do realize that's exactly what you are, from their perspective? Marcus smiled slightly. Sir, I've met the Quilvan student who sits in front of me in class. Bloop. He's terrified of everything. Gentle, kind, wouldn't hurt anyone. From my perspective, he's adorable. From his perspective, I'm a walking nightmare. We're both right. Context matters. The instructor's scales slowly returned to their normal color. You're remarkably well-adjusted for someone from a death world. We prefer to call it Earth, sir. Earth, Vexthar repeated, as if testing the word. I'm going to have nightmares about your planet's wildlife for weeks. We have very good safety protocols, sir. Tourist deaths are actually quite rare. Tourists? You have tourism. Mostly nature reserves and historical sites. The dangerous wildlife is well managed. People go their whole lives without encountering anything more threatening than a mosquito. What's a mosquito? Tiny flying insect. Drinks blood. Carries diseases. Vexthar made a strangled sound. Your world has tiny flying disease-carrying predators, and you consider them mundane? They're more annoying than dangerous, sir. We have vaccines for most of the diseases they carry. The instructor put his face in his hands. All 4 of them. You're going to be the death of me, Cadet Webb. I certainly hope not, sir. You're an excellent instructor. Vexithar looked up, something almost like amusement crossing his features. You know what the worst part of this is? You're right. You are qualified. Probably more qualified than anyone else in this program. You have practical experience with dangerous fauna that the rest of us only study from a safe distance. And that simulation performance. Any field team would be lucky to have someone with your skills. He pulled up Marcus's file again, making several notations. I'm not going to report this, yet. But you need to be careful. If Pelix starts asking questions about how you stayed so calm during the simulation, deflect. Attribute it to training, good reflexes, luck, whatever. Don't give anyone reason to dig deeper into your background. Understood, sir. And, Webb, when you do eventually graduate, when you do get assigned to a field position, remember something. The creatures you'll be working with are dangerous. They deserve respect. But you're not invulnerable. Deathworlder or not, you can still be killed. Don't get cocky. I never forget that, sir. Earth taught me that lesson early. Vexithar nodded slowly. Dismissed, Cadet. And Webb. Try not to make the other students look too incompetent. It's bad for morale. Marcus stood, offering a proper salute. I'll do my best, sir. He left the office, stepping back into the corridor where normal academy life continued around him. Students rushed to classes, complained about assignments, worried about exams. Nobody looked at him twice. His communicator buzzed. Another message from Emma. Princess Fluffybutt learned a new trick. She can roll over and play dead. Also, Mom says to tell you that Aunt Rachel got chased by a moose on her hiking trip, but she's fine. The moose was probably more scared than she was. How's space school? Marcus smiled, typing back a response. Space school is interesting. Tell Aunt Rachel to be more careful. Moose are dangerous. And give Princess Fluffybutt a treat from me. He headed toward the commissary, where Pelix was already holding court, describing their simulation to an audience of impressed cadets. And then Webb, quiet little soft-world Webb, just walks up and drops the razor bear like. It's nothing. Perfect shot placement. I didn't know he had it in him. Marcus collected his meal, something vaguely resembling pasta, that was nutritionally balanced for his species' requirements, and found a quiet corner to eat. Across the room, he could see Vexithar entering, the instructor's eyes finding him immediately. They exchanged brief nods. An understanding passed between them. The secret was safe, for now. But someday, probably soon, the truth would come out. Earth would be revealed not as a restricted access soft world, but as the death world it actually was. Humanity would be recognized as the evolutionary impossibility they represented. Sentient apex predators from a planet that should have been under quarantine. When that day came, Everything would change. But until then, Marcus had training to complete, skills to develop, and a job to prepare for. Someone needed to ensure dangerous creatures were properly protected and contained. Someone who understood them, respected them, knew how to coexist with things that could kill you. Who better than someone from Earth? He finished his meal, reviewed his assignments for the next day, and headed back to his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, new opportunities to prove himself without revealing too much. The galaxy wasn't ready for the truth about humanity yet, but someday they would be. And when that day came, Marcus hoped they would understand that being from a death world didn't make you a monster. It just meant you understood survival, adaptation, respect for the dangerous and beautiful diversity of life throughout the universe. After all, Earth had taught humanity one crucial lesson that no other species seemed to grasp. The most dangerous predators weren't always the ones with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth. Sometimes they were the ones smart enough to avoid using them. Marcus smiled to himself as he settled in for the night, Princess Fluffybutt's latest photo serving as his screen background. Somewhere out there, Vexithar was probably still processing the revelation that he'd been lecturing a Deathworlder about Deathworld fauna. The irony was delicious. And the adventure was just beginning.